Welcome back to Wartime Cafe on Free Palestine TV. We are in Rossa Cafe on Hamra Street, and we are with a returning guest, Ali Mourad, a prolific writer from al-Akhbar newspaper, political analyst. Thank you for being with us again. There's so much to talk about, especially today, the presidential election at the Parliament of Lebanon. I think a lot of people from outside Lebanon are very confused on what has happened because of the little knowledge that is there about what is the constitution of Lebanon, how does these elections of a president work, and the chaos that many saw during this election session today. The 17th, I believe, session for the election of president since the vacancy 2.5 years ago.
Yes.
So let's start with that. We have a new president, General Joseph Aoun, elected after 2 attempts today. Who's Joseph Aoun? And how can people outside the country understand this personality?
Thank you, first of all, for having me again. And it's good to see you after the war. Answering your question, General Joseph Aoun, he took the position of the chief of the Lebanese Armed Forces, the Lebanese Army, in 2017, after the election of General Michel Aoun as president in 2016, in late 2016, in October. So basically, the one who named him for this position was President Michel Aoun, and he was at first branded as a follower of the Free Patriotic Movement led by President Michel Aoun. But as you know, as many of you viewers know about Lebanon, after the protests of October 2019, General Joseph Aoun took a different path from that of President Michel Aoun.
Just for everybody to know, they're both from the Aoun family, but they're not related.
Exactly.
They're from different parts of the country.
Yes, General Michel Aoun is from Haret Hreik, from southern suburb of Beirut. And General Joseph Aoun is from the south, from the village of Aishi. It's close to the Marjayoun city in South Lebanon.
Before we sat down here, you noted he's going to be the first southerner president of Lebanon in its history.
Exactly. And maybe it's going to be a chance for him to work for the South. Now, you know, South Lebanon is, most of its villages are demolished by the brutal attacks from the Zionist army. And I think it's a chance for President Joseph Aoun to work for his, from where he came from. So General Joseph Aoun was trying to have a different path, as I said. So the way he handled the security issues after the protests and the uprising was a clear evidence that he has an ambition. He had an ambition to be the next president after General Michel Aoun. And actually, he was portrayed by many Lebanese as someone who is consolidating his relationship with the Americans. And later on, we have seen many, many signs that prove that General Joseph Aoun was trying to be America's candidate for the position. And this is what we have seen during the last month, during the war, and even after the ceasefire, and during the pressures on certain MPs and
So
political movements.
let's take his performance during the war as a indicator of what kind of policies he'll be implementing, at least in the defense. We heard him today mention in his speech that clearly was prepared way in advance, that he will be working for the protection of Lebanon from Israeli occupation and invasion. When he was the chief of staff of the military, he did not protect Lebanon from foreign attack. Is it going to be different now that he's president?
Well, there is a complicated situation here that needs to be explained. First of all, if you want to make a comparison between the situation where the Lebanese army retaliated during the 2006 war, by then the head of the Lebanese army was General Michel Sleiman, who became president in 2008. But by then, the doctrine, the military doctrine of the Lebanese army used to be conducted not by words, but also by action. It means that the Lebanese army would act according to the minimum level, which is to retaliate, to return the fires, to try to shoot on the airplanes, for example. But in 2024, in the aggression of September 2024, we've seen that the Lebanese army units were ordered to withdraw from certain checkpoints and military sites occupied by the Lebanese army close to the border with the occupied Palestinian borders. Of course, we are talking about 18 years, a period of time where this doctrine, I can't say it was changed, but it transformed due to certain conditions and facts. First of all, we have to take into consideration the economical crisis in Lebanon, where the Lebanese army was getting aid from the United States and some other foreign powers. Of course, they were doing this on behalf of the United States, for example, Qatar and other nations, regional nations. So, of course, this had to affect the way the Lebanese army would act during a situation like a war between Lebanon and the Zionist entity. It was not a war between the resistance by itself and the Zionist entity. It was a war between the state of Lebanon, and it's spontaneous to say that in such a situation, the Lebanese army has to do its job, the job that the Constitution talks about, that you have to defend the borders and the safety of your nation. Of course, the Lebanese army played another role in helping civilians who wanted to evacuate, and even in opening some roads in some parts of the south. Of course, the Lebanese army, it's unfortunate to say this, but the Lebanese army has been playing a role that is close to the internal security forces. Mm-hmm. It's like policing the internal situation in Lebanon. This is what the Lebanese army is doing since like 2-3 decades. So
a few days ago, just before this vote, I think it was 2 days ago actually, there was a cache of weapons collected from the south of Lebanon by the UNIFIL and the Lebanese army. These are weapons of the resistance and the civilians that have protection units in the south, they were destroyed by the Lebanese military instead of taking it into its own caches and having some weapons to defend itself. How can we actually analyze such behavior?
We have to make an important point here, that the Lebanese army moves according to the political decision made by the cabinet, by the Lebanese government. And this, unfortunately, played a role in the way the Lebanese army acted. So when we're talking about the UN Resolution 1701 that states that Lebanon has to deploy its official forces in South Lebanon to the southern part of the Litani River, and all the weapons that belong to other groups than the Lebanese armed forces. Here, the Lebanese army was like just fulfilling the will, the political will, by the Lebanese government and the so-called international community. It's a UN resolution. But on the other side, we have seen the Zionist entity is not respecting the resolution. It was always that Lebanon has to respect the resolution, the UN resolution, and the Zionists, they are not obliged. They don't have any obligation to respect, to abide by the resolution. So I think what took place, considering the actions by the Lebanese army, I don't think that General Joseph Aoun takes the full responsibility here. We're talking about the collective political will in Lebanon, of course, except for Hizb-u-llah, the resistance, and also taking into consideration the external factor here, talking about the U.S. influence, the European influence.
Yeah, we saw today all these ambassadors in the halls of the parliament, sitting up there.
73 diplomats were attending the session.
I mean, that is the best example of sovereignty, I guess,
Exactly.
on the planet, is when ambassadors are in there influencing your vote, and actually even inside the parliament, not in hiding. This is all free speech.
Exactly. I don't think that many of your viewers know that during the last week, we have welcomed Amos Hochstein, and also we have welcomed the Saudi envoy, Abu Fahd. He is a Saudi prince who came to put pressure on his allies. Actually, I'm talking about the Lebanese forces here. It's the largest Christian party here in Lebanon. You got also the so-called defenders of the sovereignty of Lebanon, those MPs who like to be called as the guardians of the Lebanese sovereignty. So they were pressured by Abu Fahd.
We live in this world that now every word means the opposite.
Exactly.
Of what it is.
Exactly.
Sovereignty means collaboration. Freedom means slavery. Democracy means dictatorship.
Exactly. So Mr. Abu Fahd, the Saudi prince, he was threatening them. If you don't elect General Joseph Aoun, you are going to suffer. No economic and financial aid to Lebanon. We will even put some sanctions on you, especially those of you who have business in the Gulf region. And of course, the Americans were more, polite in exerting this pressure on certain MPs and political movements. They were saying that, of course, no money would come into Lebanon, the money necessary for the rebuilding. And of course, tackling the financial crisis that Lebanon is still suffering from since 2019. So it was crucial for some political forces here in Lebanon to abide and to obey. So that's why
there was the carrot and the stick.
Exactly. So if you take a look to the 128 MPs who attended the two sessions today in Lebanon, in Beirut, you would only exclude three caucuses here. We were talking about the FPM, the Free Patriotic Movement, head by Jubran Bassil, and the Hizb-u-llah MPs, headed by Muhammad Raad, and of course the Amal movement members of parliament, headed by Speaker Nabih Berri. Those were the only three parties who had their own decision, and it proved that they, you can say that they saved what is kept from the sovereignty of Lebanon by negotiating, by forcing the Americans, the Saudis, and even the presidential candidate, the only presidential candidate to negotiate. Actually, they, after the end of the first session, they had a 2-hour break. They went during this break to negotiate. The head of the Hezbollah MPs and the head of the Amal movement MPs, Ali Hassan Khalil, they, they sat with the General Joseph Aoun, and they agreed upon the structure of the coming government, cabinet, and of course about the certain crucial things, especially when we're talking about the rebuilding, because it was rumored
the reconstruction,
that during the reconstruction the Americans are going to veto some of the money that's supposed to come into Lebanon to aid this reconstruction. So I think that Amal movement and Hezbollah and even FPM, they made their print here by saying that we are
still independent.
We are keen to guardian this sovereignty.
So we spoke now about General Aoun and his background, what we expect a little bit from him. Maybe we'll get back to what we should be expecting a little bit more from him. But let's take a step back and explain to the viewer about how the mess that we saw, these elections, how does that relate to the Constitution, the sectarianism, and so forth? Because there is nothing written in the Constitution that says the president has to be from the Maronite sect. While we see an insistence on that, people don't understand also probably the balance of al-Ta'if that doesn't exist now, and what is a Ta'if agreement. And that maybe will allow us to speak about Syria in a second. So break down the procedures that happened today, break down some of the clauses of the Constitution that were just thrown out the window for people to understand what really happened.
Well, I'm not a constitutional expert, but I can tell you that, as you mentioned, the Syrian era and the Taif agreement in 1989, it's useful here to say that nothing has changed since 1989 when we are talking about the making of the new president. It used to be the Syrians since the beginning of the 90s until 2005 when they withdrew from Lebanon. Abu Jamal and Abu Abdu, Abu Jamal, I'm talking about Ghazi Kanaan. He was the top general managing the situation, the political situation in Lebanon.
Syrian general.
Yeah, and also later on we met, I forgot his name. He died years ago. Rustam Ghazali.
Yes.
Rustam Ghazali also he used to say our candidate is, for example.
And so just
this
so
guy.
people can understand that the
So
Taif
now-
agreement was between really Syria and Saudi Arabia,
Saudi
as a
Arabia.
joint governance of Lebanon. Syria gets the president, Saudi Arabia gets the prime minister.
Exactly.
And that lasted, kind of the regional influence when Syria still had its ability to project power.
Exactly.
And now that doesn't
So
exist.
now we witnessed that Abu Fahd came to replace the.
Now it's all Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it's all Saudi Arabia.
So it's
And you got the Americans.
Yes.
Americans.
It's all the same.
They were controlling indirectly, by giving the green light for the Syrians and the Saudis. But now they are sharing the Saudis in the decision making regarding Lebanon. But if you want to talk about the Constitution, the 49th article in the Constitution, it talks about the way the conditions for someone to run for president. It says, for example, if you are a class 1, an employee in the government, there are classifications: class 1, 2, 3, 4. If you are classified as a top employee, a class 1, you are not authorized to run for president unless you resign, and it has to.
It's a 2 years.
2 years period to be eligible to run for president. So, in order to elect Joseph Aoun, who was actually on doing his job as a class 1 employee in the government, they had to freeze the working, applying the Constitution, so that the guy.
But they didn't even vote on it.
Yes, so there's something in Lebanon called the constitutional fatwa, and this is done. Though it's not written in the Constitution, but by practice, it has the same weight of the written text in the Constitution. So that's why they made the president a Maronite, and the prime minister as a Sunni, and the parliament speaker a Shia. And of course, you got more, this partitioning issue in the whole government. We're talking about the ministries, the cabinet, the whole cabinet, and also the positions in each ministry, and also in the army, and the internal security forces. Also, in all aspects of life in Lebanon, you got this equation that every job you have to split it, a Christian and a Muslim.
And also a Shia and a Sunni.
And a Sunni.
And then sometimes a Druze and a...
Yeah, and if you're talking about the Christians, here the Catholics, the Maronites, the Orthodox.
There's quotas basically in all the public service, and even the security services are divvied up, the different security services between different sects. So, in a way, it's like common law practice that is not written, and we saw this chaos. It really is about who has power to do whatever they want to at the moment. And what we saw today was an end of that completely, the era of al-Ta'if, specifically about that sharing power with Syria. And we also, right now, both the president and the prime minister are going to be anointed by the United States. The only thing that's left for outside of the control of the US right now is the position of the Speaker of the House of Parliament, because the common practice is that they're Shia, and up until now there is no Shia traitor party that could be working with the US.
They tried to work on making this Shia traitor appear in the 2022 elections.
He's the false Mahdi that we're trying for.
But they failed actually. So they are eyeing to do it in 2026, in the next elections next year. If they make the elections now, if the elections are conducted now, maybe they can do it. It depends on the popularity of the resistance. I think we have to be straight here. During the war, there was a psychological warfare being practiced on the whole environment in Lebanon, and in precise the Shia population here. Because if you go back to what the spokesman for Arabic in the Israeli occupation forces used to send his messages to the Lebanese, and of course to the residents of the areas they used to bombard. And also, if you take a look, if you go back to what the some of the Lebanese media was broadcasting, they were like giving a hand to the Zionists. And of course, it's not, it was done, and I can call it a conspiracy by some Gulf countries who fund those media outlets in Lebanon. It's well known that some Lebanese media outlets are funded by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. They were sharing the Zionist entity in waging this psychological warfare. Maybe some of the population were affected by this warfare, this kind of information warfare. But you can say that the majority of the Shia population, they are more committed to stick to the resistance, in supporting the resistance, though we are talking about a new situation where the historic leader of the resistance in Lebanon has been martyred. I'm talking about Sayyid Nasrallah. Of course, many of the huge portion now of the population, the Shia population in Lebanon, they are still under shock. It's a trauma actually to lose such a historic leader. They cannot pass this. Of course, we are now talking, and his body is not, his funeral has not been done. So hopefully during his funeral, it's going to be like a referendum. It's like Hizb-u-llah and the leadership of Hizb-u-llah, and also those who are responsible for such an event, they want to make sure that the voice of the supporters of the resistance, I'm not talking about the Shia population here, I'm talking about other supporters of the resistance from other religions and sects, they are going to share in his funeral. And I think we are going to witness some foreign delegations who would come to Beirut to share in the funeral. So the situation, yes, of course, there is destruction and a devastating situation, especially in South Lebanon, now that the Zionists have not withdrawn from all the villages they entered, especially when we go closer to the borders. But I think by January 27th, there's going to be a new situation in case the Zionists decided to stay.
So January 27th is the 60 days end of this ceasefire. Just 7 days before it will be the appointment of the new Emperor Trump.
Yeah.
And in a way, so a lot of people were saying the rush to appoint a president in Lebanon was under threat, basically, that if Trump comes into power and there's no president in Lebanon, things will be dealt differently, and the deadline for the 27th of January for the withdrawal of the Israelis from all the territories they occupy currently would pass, and they will not leave. So do you feel that in the next 20 somewhat days, the Israelis will actually withdraw from South Lebanon?
Well, they'd better do it, because nothing is, we can't take anything for granted here. Because what we have seen from the Zionists and the US backing of the Zionists during the war on Lebanon, you can expect anything. Actually, if you ask me, from the point of view of the resistance itself, there is a state of anger, of course. Tension is at its highest level. People are asking when the current situation is going to be changed, because people are witnessing the demolishing of their houses during the ceasefire period, the truce period. So it's something disturbing, of course, to the southerner population. And I think the resistance is committed to do the job it was entangled to do, which is to defend the population, to defend the sovereignty of Lebanon. Of course, the resistance, as we heard Sheikh Naim Qasim, the new Secretary General of Hizb-u-llah, has expressed that we cannot accept this situation. Of course, he kept it mysterious how the resistance is going to act before the end of the period or after it, what would be done during the action if it was taken. So all of this is still, you don't have answers, direct answers to these questions, but I have the belief and my own opinion that the resistance is going to move and trying to show the Zionists and the Americans, and on top of them, the Trump administration, that you cannot force us to surrender the way you want. We are not going to let you demolish our houses, occupy our lands for an open period of time without doing anything in return. Every action has a reaction.
So there is a lot of change in the strategic outlook for Lebanon as a whole and the resistance in Lebanon with the fall of the Syrian government and the coming of Wahhabi death squads into government in Damascus, even having now Uyghur and Turkmen generals in the Syrian army.
The Syrian Arab Army.
The Syrian Arab Army. And Israel has occupied huge swaths of the south of the country, practically all the Qalamun range up to almost the highway between Damascus and Beirut. On all sides of Lebanon right now, there are enemies. And we heard the HTS leadership, including their foreign affairs minister, minister of military, and their new president, that their enemies are Hezbollah and Iran, not Israel, not Turkey, not the Americans. Is in a situation where the Israelis don't withdraw and a trigger of hostilities happens, what is the possibilities of these HTS attacking from the north or the east, and even the Israelis attacking from the Qalamun mountains towards the Beqa Valley?
Well, in such a situation, there would be an alliance between the HTS authorities and forces and the Israelis. And I don't think that the new governors of Damascus are willing to so that the this accusation would be branded next to their names, because yes, they confessed, they claim that they made use of the situation that took place in the region, of some circumstances regarding the al-Aqsa flood war, and it was obvious from their point of view that they thought that Iran and Hizb-u-llah in Lebanon, as well as the Syrian regime, ex-regime, they have weakened after the war. So that's why they, I think, they were guided by the Turks, by Turkey, and the Americans, because there's a sign here, we have to mention it. During the first visit by Amos Hochstein to Beirut in the beginning of October during the war, he was bringing with him the terms of the ceasefire. And among the terms, there was something that asks Lebanon to accept the deployment of multinational forces on the borders between Lebanon and Syria. And of course, Benjamin Netanyahu was talking about the prevention of the weapons smuggling from Syria to Lebanon to the hands of the resistance. Later on, it turned out that Hochstein stopped talking about this term, and when we read the terms in the ceasefire, the points, they didn't mention the so-called smuggling of weapons between Syria and Lebanon, and that, of course, they mentioned that the Lebanese army has to spread and deploy on the borders to control the borders, and this is something normal. It turned out that hours after the ceasefire between Lebanon and the Zionist entity, those groups from Idlib started their offensive towards Aleppo, and then to Hama, and then to Homs. And the situation that ended on December the 8th, on the morning of that day, we've seen that the collapse of the Syrian regime, led by Bashar al-Assad, has led spontaneously to the blocking of the road, of the land road that the Zionist has been talking about since years. So maybe the Americans, this way, they have told the Israelis that we have reached this term without even firing a bullet, without even having to exert more pressure on the Lebanese to accept the multinational forces to be deployed on the
because
borders.
the Wahhabi death squads are the multinational
Exactly.
force of the United States.
They can do it by I don't know what to say.
Proxy.
By proxy. Yeah. So of course, we know the ideology and the backgrounds of HTS. They are Al-Qaeda. No matter how hard they try to show that they are changed, they reformed, they are expelling the strict and terrorist ideology. But we have seen in the actions of their fighters by following and attacking the officers and ex-officers in the Syrian Arab army, how they are acting. The same language we used to hear 10 years ago, we are hearing it now.
Yeah, there's around 200 Syrians being killed every day since December 8th. That's the average, people being lynched in the streets. And that's above and beyond the regular crime of looting that is happening, and people being killed as those looting was happening. So to some people outside the region, it was a huge surprise how the Syrian military collapsed. But there was a prolonged siege and starvation of the country. The salaries of the Syrian soldiers were down to around $15 a month. It was no more really a will to resist under these conditions. Did the resistance feel that it was coming? Was there preparations for it? Because obviously there was Hezbollah fighters on the ground in Syria, there was Iranians on the ground in Syria, and we didn't hear much of deaths from Hezbollah fighters and or Iranians on the ground in Syria since the fall of the government.
Well, what we have seen and listened to from the Iranian officials, they have said it clearly that they have been warning the ex-Syrian president that something is being prepared in Idlib. There's going to be an offensive. They have been sending those warnings and messages months ago, even 2 or 3 months before the offensive took place. And what we learned later, that actually the ex-Syrian president, he used to deal in a way that the Americans are not interested in ousting me or enforcing me to abandon the ruling here. But if you take a look to the easy fall of the cities with no fighting that took place from the Syrian Arab Army, it was obvious that certain officers in the Syrian Arab Army have been communicating with the leaders of HTS. This is not an analysis. It's some information that proves that some of the officers, and we later on, we've seen some of them who went to the reconciliation centers that HTS made in some cities. They were delivering their own weapons and signing on the papers and having the card that would spare him from being attacked. And they are living in their own houses. Nobody is attacking them. Those officers, some of them were so close to Bashar al-Assad. Of course, there are other rumors that certain officers sold the intelligence about the situation in the Syrian Arab Army regarding the will to fight. Actually, this is the most important thing that was put on the table when they wanted to plan an offensive towards Aleppo and Hama. And it turned out that the situation in Damascus was not as tough as it used to show to some analysts and people who were concerned to watch what's going on in the capital, because as we have learned from some employees who used to work in the presidential palace, of course, if it turns out that they are telling the truth now, that the Syrian president, that Bashar al-Assad, was living a state of denial, that nothing serious is taking place. But we know that the Iranians sent many officials to speak with him. Even to the last official, he arrived in Damascus on December 7th, and they spoke with him about, we are ready to send all the weapons necessary, even the personnel, the fighters. But he received the signs that his own army is not willing to fight. That's why he made his most important and crucial decision to withdraw and not fight. Of course.
What's the role of Russia in all of this? I mean, it seems that clearly the Russians had more say on the Syrian army than the Iranians or Hezbollah for a long time. That was very clear. It's Russia that for instance, tried to block General Soleimani from liberating al-Bukamal on the border with Iraq. It's Russia that stopped the battle in Idlib. And it's all Russian, equipment, including the communication equipment that the Syrian military was using during the attack of HTS. We heard multiple times the communication was jammed of the Syrian military. We heard also the calls for withdrawal and surrender coming on those communication devices. Can we really underplay what Russia's deal has been, with Turkey, with Ukraine, with the United States, all of those?
Well, we are.
And right now, as far as we know, former President Assad is in Russia, as far as we know.
Well, we are listening to many rumors being said about the role of Russia here. But there are some certain facts here to mention. That Russia didn't want the Iranians to gain more influence in Syria. That they played a role in grabbing some officers who were crucial in the work they have done in the Syrian Arab Army to their side, to prevent Iran from attracting those officers to their side. Of course, we have read reports about a bargain that took place here between Ukraine and Syria. If I want to believe such reports, it's going to be reasonable to assess that the Russians, if they had to decide whether they want to fulfill their interests in Ukraine or in Syria, they would prefer Ukraine, because Ukraine is something that targets their own national security, and it's an existential thing, the war now taking place in Ukraine. Where in Syria, the Russian presence in Syria was crucial for their global role and influence. Maybe they assessed that they have an alternative location, which is in Libya, for example, if they had to decide to abandon Syria. It's a possibility that might be the truth, but with regards to the weapons and the weapons systems, I don't think that the Russians would send those weapons to place them in Syria, and would risk letting those sophisticated weapons systems to be in the hands of HTS and other groups. It's not reasonable.
But we saw them being allowed to re-export basically the weapons from their bases.
The heavy
HTS
weapons,
gave them everything.
So here, if you take the way HTS behaved with Russia up till now, I think that maybe it's a pragmatic move, because they want to balance between the American presence and the Russian presence inside Syria, so that they don't want to rush asking Russians to withdraw completely from Syria before there's an American sign that Trump is going to withdraw the US troops from the eastern side of Syria. So maybe they are going to play this game by asking both sides to withdraw from Syria. Of course, this is a perfect situation for Turkey, and also it's good for al-Julani, who wants to centralize the ruling, his rule in Damascus. He wants to have the full control on the eastern parts. Of course, this is going to be the most delighting part of the story here, because they would be attacking the Kurds, SDF, to end the military power of the Kurds in the eastern parts of Syria. And of course, we're talking about the coastal side of Syria. It's crucial for Damascus, of course, for Turkey, because we were talking about a foreign power deployment here on the shores next to the Turkish shores. Of course, Turkey has an ambition to expand in the region. So the more foreign powers leave the region, the more it's in their favor.
Well, clearly Trump has said that he wants to loot the oil openly. And right now, that was in his first term. And right now he's coming in guns blazing, saying he wants to take Greenland, Canada, and Panama, and who knows what, even Mexico. Now he wants to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America. And we saw the funny reply from the new president of Mexico saying, let's change much of the United States, call it the Mexican America, which was the original name. Exactly. But yeah, so why would this new open emperor that is very clear about his imperial lusts, who's threatening his own vassals, no allies, well, we can't call them allies really, his own vassals, to take even the little resources that they're allowed to play with as vassals, to take them all from them? Why would they leave the loot of Syria and Iraq, for instance?
Well, we have a stance that Trump took in his first presidency in 2019, when he suddenly came out and said, I'm going to withdraw our troops from Syria. We have seen how the Zionist lobby acted by then. There was something called the Syria Study Group that was issued in the Congress, that by accident, the two heads of the group, they were both from Washington Institute for Near East Policy, so that the Zionists would be controlling the reports of this group. And the two reports issued by this group, they made an assessment in the two reports that Trump should not withdraw the U.S. troops from Syria. It's going to harm the security of Israel, and it's going to have a devastating effect on the Kurds, who are our allies. So we have seen that Trump listened to the neocons in his administration and the Zionist lobby. But now, before the elections, if you go back in memory, what RFK Jr. said, he was talking about something that Trump told him during a flight on board of the Trump plane. He was telling him on the map, he was pointing at Syria, and he said that there's going to be a huge war now taking place between the Turkey and the Kurds, and we have 2,000 troops here. I'm going to save them. I'm not going to let them in the carnage, in the middle of the carnage that is going to take place. I don't know. It's not clear if Trump is going to stick to his promise from the first presidency that he's going to withdraw the troops from Syria. But if you take a look what the FDD and all the Likud wing of the Zionist lobby in Washington are saying, they are pushing and they are trying to put pressure on Trump to stick to the same position and the same decision to remain on the same situation now in Syria, and to invest more in protecting the SDF, because we know that the Zionist goal was to that Syria goes into partitioning, so that we have three states, a Druze and Kurdish state, and a Sunni state in the middle, and an Alawite state on the coast. This was the perfect situation for the Israelis. They believe that in such a scenario, they would have a direct border with the Iraqis. They would prevent Turks from expanding in the region, and also they would maintain that no other moves and tries in the future that Iran would proceed in sending weapons by land to Lebanon, to the resistance. Of course, things didn't go as they planned, and I think that Trump would compensate the amount of oil if he took a decision to withdraw from Syria. He would take it as, you know, those 300,000 barrels per day from Syria. We would have 3.5 million barrels per day from Canada. So we are going to compensate the loss here. That's how Trump is going to look at it. I think that Donald Trump second term is going to be out of expectations. He hasn't entered the White House. He is not inaugurated yet, and we have seen what he has done with regards to the, I'd like to call them assets, US assets. I'm talking about the Europeans and at least the way he looks at those. The Mexicans and the Canadians and the Panamas and the rest of the Latin American countries. In Washington today, they are claiming that Trump is going to revive the Monroe Doctrine. He is going to make a full control, to control the whole American continent.
Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, the Western Hemisphere.
And the Monroe Doctrine at least was looking south towards the brown people. Now he's also looking north towards
exactly. Maybe he's going to cross the Atlantic and go to Europe. Who knows?
So, you know, originally the debate was, will Trump accelerate the war in Ukraine or accelerate the war against the axis of resistance in terms of capturing new territory for the empire? But he just threw this wrench in everybody's thinking with his declarations about Greenland, Panama, and Canada. And immediately, obviously, as an emperor, his words have huge effects. We saw Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, step down. Maybe the guy didn't want to be the last Prime Minister of Canada that the country has lost on his watch. He said, let me get out of here before. So, I mean, clearly the insecurity and the instability and the inability to analyze is accelerating the more of these war fronts are opening. How will Lebanon look as the outlook for Lebanon in the short term of this? And then we're going to let you go because we're taking so much of your time.
No, you're welcome. Actually, Lebanon is in a critical situation now. There are priorities now. If you ask me from the resistance point of view, there are priorities now. The first priority is to rebuild, to reconstruct the destroyed villages so that people would return to their homes and villages. Of course, there's a priority to rebuild the capabilities of the resistance, because no matter what Benjamin Netanyahu says about preventing the resistance from rebuilding its capabilities, this resistance knows how to do it and what is necessary to do it. and nobody can prevent the resistance from doing this. The resistance has the minds, the will, and the capacity to perhaps manufacture their own weapons. We have seen during the war, the most effective weapon in their arsenal was the drones, the suicide drones. And this is an information, I give it to you. Most of those drones, they are made by the Hezbollah engineers. So they can manufacture their own weapons. Of course, the operation of the beepers, the pagers, has taught Hezbollah what is necessary to do to count on your own abilities, to have a
To be self-sufficient.
yeah, self-sufficient in such thing. It's not impossible. I think they can cope and adapt, because if you take a look, we're now talking about 43 years of the resistance in Lebanon. The most important conclusion you can exclude from the way Hezbollah took action during the threats, and how they could change those threats into opportunities. They can do it again. They can adapt. They learn from their own missteps. And I think the new resistance is going to be more dangerous to the Zionists than the previous structure of the resistance. We don't have to exclude here the fact that from the security level, the intelligence, Hezbollah is going to be cautious in the next period of time. The Israelis would face a lot of difficulties to know what is going on inside Hezbollah. So I'm not afraid that the resistance is going to be affected by the Trump policies. In the end, Trump is a dealer. He likes to make deals. So we have to see what would take place regarding the Iranian nuclear program. I don't think that Trump is going to attack Iran, the nuclear reactors, because this would mean that Iran would retaliate and attack the US bases in the region. And
There was
scenario,
this morning announcement from Iran that it activated one of these very advanced radar systems on top of the highest mountains ranges in Iran, and now they have a big view of everything that's happening in the air, in the area that could be coming to them as a threat. There's a lot we can talk about with you, and honestly, there's the issues ahead of us are huge. The genocide in Gaza continues. The attacks on the West Bank continue. Yemen is still fighting for Palestine. The situation in Iraq, we don't know where it's going under these conditions of the regional changes and the global changes. We hope to have you another time to discuss many of these things. Ali Mourad, al-Akhbar, writer and political analyst. Thank you very much for being with us. You're still watching Free Palestine TV, Wartime Cafe. Please visit our website, freepalestine.video. Donate, share our local social media on all platforms. Until we meet you next time, we bid you all a free Palestine.